So I'm very, very happy to introduce to you, but I'm sure many of you know her, Cathy Lloyd Thomas. Cathy is a professor of architectural theory and history at Newcastle University and an editor of Architectural Research Quarterly. Her research focuses on materiality, technology, and the production of architecture. And she will present a research that is part of a work that she has been developed in the last years on the architect role in the circulation of proprietary building products in the interwar period in the UK. And I really want to stress how important her work has been really on the issue of the relationship between architecture, labor, and construction. And I think Christine Wall, Linda Clark has also been very important figures in this discussion. So in a way, also our symposium was also very much inspired by their work. So thank you, Cathy, to be part of this symposium, and we look forward to your presentation.
Gosh, thank you very much, Pier Vittorio. I'm not sure I can live up to all of that, but anyway, let me share my screen. Okay. So yeah, thanks very much for an amazing. Thanks for the invitation, but also for an amazing morning. And I hope you can hear me and see my slides. Great. It's been really good, actually, especially I think both Maria and Georgios have sort of raised the question of building materials and their role, obviously, in the building site. And it's really about building materials that I'm going to talk more than I'm going to kind of flirt with the building site, if you like, in this talk. I'm not going to get terribly close to it. So the context for the paper is the interwar period in Britain and the vast expansion which took place at the time in the quantity and variety of proprietary or branded building products that were marketed and used in building construction. From boilers, light switches and fittings, cables and electric clocks, to roofing products, off-the-peg windows, wallboards, insulation and panels, floor coverings, varnishes and paints. A particular significance to the history of architecture is that this change added a new role to the architect's remit, that of proprietary specification, or the selecting and specifying of one product over another. So in the clause shown here from the specification from a 1930s house, East Wall, built just outside London, the architect, Elizabeth Benjamin, selects and names particular brands of electrical components. Significant first is that the architect's area of responsibility has expanded beyond the shell of the house to include new kinds of products. Second, the architect now has a new role as shopper on behalf of her client. As this correspondence, and there's much more of it, between Benjamin and her client attests. Third, the products are now specified within a legally binding contractual document, the specification. If a product is named within the specification, the manufacturer is guaranteed sales. So the architect is now a product broker on behalf of the manufacturer. And here you can see the paint specification, including a specification for Ripolin paint. And in this particular case, the client was himself a manufacturer. He ran the Ripolin business in Britain. And of course, he asks the architect to specify his company's paint. Before moving on, I want to stress that this proliferation of new products shouldn't be understood merely as a change in how buildings are constructed or as separate from architecture in design. Indeed, I've argued it transforms the definition of what the architect does and, whether we like it or not, the scope of architecture as a discipline. For as we learned earlier from David Sacconi's discussion of Sérgio Ferro, wherever construction is a capitalist enterprise, there is a necessary relation between the processes and techniques of the architect and the organisation of labour and the extraction of surplus value via construction. In other words, in this paper, when trying to ask about the impact of building products on labour, I'm going to try and keep in mind at the same time the architect's role in these relations. It would be possible, I suppose, to think about the building products without keeping the architect in mind. So the project I'm drawing on here, entitled The Architect as Shopper, attempts to explore a wide range of causes and effects of this change, one of them being the entry of women into jobs in and around the building products industry at the time, that might even have provided the context in which architecture became a more acceptable profession for women. And it's particularly these new sites of labour that I'm going to look at today. But Pier Vittorio's provocation with this symposium, and the fact that I'm also now involved with the Anglo-Brazil project to translate the work of Sérgio Ferro towards trying to sort of consolidate or develop a field we're calling production studies. This project, by the way, is called Translating Ferro, Transforming Knowledges, and great to sort of introduce it to all of you today. Anyway, these new forces have prompted me to consider more broadly, beyond the gender focus of my work today, to what extent building products might have displaced labour from the building site, or, as I suspect is more likely, multiplied sites of labour at a time when building was one of the few buoyant industries. I don't have any answers to this yet, so any thoughts, pointers, or contributions are very welcome. My cat's just arrived and caused chaos. And if you would just mind a moment, I'm going to just take her out and then return to you in a second. So. Okay. As was celebrated last year with the centenary of the 1919 Housing Act, often known as the Addison Act, the British government launched a massive campaign to build hundreds of thousands of new state-funded homes across the country to make up for the 4-year hiatus in house building during World War I. Becontree Estate, for example, was built by the London County Council in what is now Barking and Dagenham. And you can just see it just at sort of in the top right outside the boundary of London. It was the most ambitious of these schemes, and at the time, the largest state housing scheme in Europe. The Homes Fit for Heroes campaign has been brilliantly documented by Mark Swennerton, who argues that one of the primary objectives of this house building campaign was also to avoid major social unrest and revolution even. He shows the difficulties government and local councils faced keeping costs sufficiently low while at the same time labour and materials were in short supply. But it's not been observed that this vast building project offered a massive market for building materials during a time of economic depression. It would be no surprise then, at a time when large-scale industry in the UK was already decreasing, to discover that manufacturers might seize on the opportunity to switch their product lines to building materials. And the sort of closest direct evidence I found of this is through the story of Critall windows and the ways that they aimed their products at this new housing boom. So Critall's, as some of you might know, grew out of a family ironmonger's business that was based in Braintree, Essex. They started making metal windows in the 1880s, and apparently the metal window trade was given a bit of a boost because there was a small earthquake in 1884 in Essex. So this seems to have helped Critall's along. So they were already very active and successful in by the early 20th century, but it's really World War I which gave their business a huge impetus. They joined the war effort, making shells, And as Francis Henry Critall put it in his autobiography, in only one particular did our window business profit directly from our flutter with militarism. We had learned the art of mass production. When it became clear that the war was coming to an end, Critall spotted what he called certain favourable circumstances. We knew, for example, he wrote, that there had been little or no building other than for military purposes for 4 years. Hundreds of thousands of domestic dwellings were an immediate need, and the premises of hundreds of large firms that had developed during the war were ready for reconstruction. It needed little acumen, he went on, to deduce that in the near future, building components would be in very great demand. Crittall realised that to make mass production work for his windows, the company would need to move away from making up frames at sizes to suit clients and designers, and instead to persuade them of the benefits of standardisation. So his designer brother, Valentine Critall, otherwise known as Mr. Pink, put together a team of 12 architects to come up with the new standardised windows that were shown in this booklet, and worked to ensure, as David Blake has put it, that homes fit for heroes were fitted with metal windows and not timber ones. So the product literature is really interesting in that Crittall's aim their windows at just any and every kind of style of housing across Britain, and in particular calling some of their windows cottage windows, I think aiming at these kind of new cottage estates as well. And he also used the building of Silver End, which was his kind of village for workers in a couple of the factories, as a kind of showcase for these windows, employing a number of different architects to design different parts of the village. So what you get is not just the modernist houses that Silver End is better known for, showing off Crittall's windows, but also Neo-Georgian, and even the barn which they moved to the village to form the church at the centre of the village has been kitted out in Critall metal windows. Crittall's brother Valentine was on the board of the Design Industries Association, and he also negotiated with the Ministry of Housing to secure an early contract for Admiralty housing. And from then on, according to Blake, Crittall standard cottage windows were used on almost every housing scheme throughout the country. I can't believe she's come back again. She doesn't normally do this. Right, just sit there. She does have a very good habit, though, of coming in just at the sort of sections, the pause sections, just between my. So that's very considerate of her. Okay. So to lead into this next section, I'm showing a page from the catalogue of a rival metal windows manufacturer. And this is Hope Windows, who also made metal windows. And I'm showing it because they're so explicit in the fact that they're marketing their windows to women. They find all sorts of kind of reasons. They're easy to clean, they bring in light, and women love light. The next page shows the children's nursery. And what I want to do is sort of come back to the fact that women weren't just consumers, if you like, of these building products, but I want to set the scene here for the fact that that products were being marketed towards to women. And I also want to make the point that there were sort of many techniques that that manufacturers came up with for marketing their products, and we've seen some of them already from Crittall's. So Crittall's often named architects in their product literature to show who'd been using their windows. They used some really exquisite kind of modernist design as well to appeal to architects. And this is one of my favourites. This is the Window Dictionary that, according to Francis Critall, started out as a sort of useful collection of Windows terminology passed around the factory floor. But what it does is place the brand names of windows and the sort of fixings that they used and the pattern joints amidst vernacular phrases that had been in use for centuries. So Critall seek to insert their metal standardized windows into a tradition of window making, as if trade names and solutions are outside the world of branding and corporate ownership, whilst at the same time enlisting architects' help to secure the mass consumption of their products. Other manufacturers had many other tricks. Some were very much to appeal to the sort of technical expertise of architects. So this is Mander Brothers producing a series of kind of proprietary clauses that architects could just paste straight into their specifications. Other manufacturers recruited architects to work with their products and kind of give them a kind of design cachet. So this is Jack Pritchard, who went and worked as a sort of marketing manager at Venesta Plywood, and of course much better known for getting Gropius and Breuer in to design chairs to sort of help the kind of image of Venesta Ply and secure sales. Pritchard also managed to get Corbusier to design one of the Venesta trade stands. And so this is from Olympia Building Trades exhibition in 1930. So this was a really common practice that architects would design stands for building manufacturers. And just to draw your attention to the ply column, or the birch column there on the right, and a little kind of treat, I found the letter that Pritchard writes to the timber yard in Estonia, to Venesta's timber yard, asking for the kind of perfectly straight log that can be used in Corbusier's design. And here we see a plan. This is a slightly later trade show. Really interesting to see the kind of spatializing, if you like, of all of these different producers, and to remember that it wasn't just people involved in the building industry that went to these shows, but vast numbers of the general public as well. This is a sort of rare image I found of people at one of these shows, and I think we can just see one woman there, judging from the shoes. But there were also exhibitions that were aimed particularly at women. So the Ideal Home Show is one of them. This is the Bachelor Girls exhibition from 1930. So given this sort of, given the fact that women were being recruited as the consumers of products, it's perhaps not surprising that they also start to get involved in sales and marketing of building products. And this ad, this is just sort of an interesting image here, because it's for a wiring system which we can't see. So it's effectively for cables, and we can't see it at all in the image. We just see the effect of lighting and this sort of glamorous environment for these women in their evening dresses. But the ad is actually in the pages of a magazine that was produced by the Electrical Association for Women. So it's in fact aimed at women who would have known something about the electrical industry. And the EAW were both campaigning for the electrification of homes across Britain, but they were also training women in quite sort of technical skills. It was run by an electrical engineer called Caroline Hazlitt, and also to become this kind of new job of electrical demonstrators, where women would show other women how to use the new appliances, how to come to terms with electrification, also to sort of take some of the fear out of it. So this is a demonstration taking place in the EAW's headquarters in Regent Street. So sort of vast new kind of workforce, if you like, of women in these sort of semi-technical areas. Here, Elise Tomlinson-Lee, who gains her EAW diploma and goes on to work in Leighton Showroom and have a very successful career. So coming a bit closer to home now, and also perhaps closer to the kind of the sort of strictly speaking, the world of building products that we're talking about. So one of the most interesting mechanisms, if you like, for the marketing of building products was the Building Centre, which was set up by the AA's General Secretary, Frank Yerbury, and opened in New Bond Street in 1932. Part product library, part art gallery. It was done up like a sort of department store and set up to stimulate public interest in building. And the idea was that clients could visit with their architects, look at various different building products in this kind of rather sumptuous environment, and make selections. They couldn't make purchases. And just to sort of to contrast that perhaps with what we think of as a building products library, which is in fact what the Building Centre emerged from, which was the Building Materials Bureau at the AA. But what the press endlessly noticed and discussed was the astonishing amount of women who visited the Building Centre. And so you see three ladies on the left enjoying a sort of a communal basin exhibit in the Building Centre, and on the right, a fur-clad lady who's presumably, been buying jewellery and so on, popping into the Building Centre to have a look at boilers. But we also see a woman, I think it's Marjorie Morrison, painting the mural here, who was also the slide librarian at the AA. So Yerbury was recruiting women to work in the Building Centre. And probably most important of these was Alma Dicker, who designed exhibition displays and was kind of responsible for the look and the organisation of the centre, and also became its general manager eventually. So as with electricity, but to a much more modest extent, women were recruited for their ability to make products relevant and acceptable to other women, with the converse effect of combining technical expertise with these more feminine settings and techniques of the department store. On the one hand, having women at the heart of the building industry transformed it, but on the other, we can think of this as a means for more of the population to be employed in the industry at a time when work was hard to come by. Certainly, the interwar expansion of the building products industry entailed new kinds of jobs, many of which, as we've seen, were taken up by women and facilitated the circulation of these goods. But one photographic archive I found tells a very different story. And this is for STC, Standard Telephone Cables Manufacturers. And they were first cited in North Woolwich, so it's an American company, and they moved in the 1930s to a site in Southgate. And these photographs show the extent to which women were involved also in the production of these goods. While Crittall's barely employed any women in its factories, apparently just in one, making leaded lights, so the most dangerous kind of part of the window production process. STC employed them in droves, and you wouldn't know this from reading the histories of the company. It's only when you open up these kind of boxes of photographs that you see what the reality. So these are compelling photographs. They're a counter to the calendar's cables ad we saw earlier, which showed women only as consumers, not as producers. These photographs also return us to the factory, where no doubt more men laboured than women, manufacturing these boilers, cables, wallboards, insulation, panels and paints, which architects prescribed in their specifications. With respect to the impact of mass production on practice, design and labour, architectural histories have tended to focus more on prefabricated building systems where labour on site is replaced by labour in the factory. Paying attention to building products suggests a more hybrid situation. These intermediate commodities, which are neither the finished building nor designed items that can function independently, can still be used alongside and within a labour-intensive building process on site. So to take as an example a set of construction photos of the London County Council's Watling Cottage Estate, which in fact is just a few miles from the STC factory. Perhaps even some of their workers lived here at Watling. The pictures are surprisingly devoid of building workers and show often building materials in piles on site, ready to be installed. Train tracks were laid across the site for the transportation of materials. Indeed, the contractor appointed to do the construction work at Watling was first and foremost a railway builder. And this contractor is Willis and Sons. And these photographs are taken from the building of Becontree, where they were also the main contractor on site. And this kind of astonishing pier that was built into the River Thames to allow the transport of materials to Becontree. The LCC did experiment with building methods in their cottage estates. As Swinnerton explains, they trialled a mix of building methods in their efforts to control labour costs, using traditional materials alongside prefabricated panels, as well as the kind of building products that I've been talking about. And these may well be Critall's metal windows that we see here. We might think of this proliferation of building materials that are mass-produced off-site, not simply as replacing more traditional raw materials, but as multiplying and intensifying the opportunities for labour to feed into the building process, albeit remotely. And if architects' techniques of design, drawing and specification have traditionally orchestrated the business of labouring on-site, as Ferro has argued, the proprietary specification extends this role to these expanded sites of labour. Via the proprietary specification, architects become gatekeepers for these products, drawing up shopping lists, lubricating their passage, and ensuring their entry into the site of building.